Ready to
Not
roll?
quite ready yet.
Okay. I gotta get me wired up.
Okay. So Chris is going to give the program today, and it's going to be on Sun Tzu and how it's affected various battles in the world history, and especially our Indian wars here locally. And he studied this for many years, and so you all have a handout. It's white in tail. And so I'm here to guide Chris. He can go on tangents. So I need to come and
Yeah, when I start
get him
talking nonsense, she grabs me by the arm. Come on, slap.
So Chris Morton, Sun Tzu.
All right, thank you, Judy, very much. This is all about a guy named Sun Tzu. Most of you never heard of him. But Sun Tzu is a very important person in military history. This is basically started with my senior thesis in college in 1960. So this is 50-something years old. And then later we added the Indian Wars on in 2009. And so I think you'll find it interesting. We tried to make it not too complicated. We gave you all a copy of what Sun Tzu says you ought to do. And the great fun for you is then to find a book about a different battle and then look and say, did the guy do what Sun Tzu said or didn't he? And then look at the outcome of the battle. You'll be amazed. You'll be knocked off your feet. And then finally I'm going to ask you a question, and that question is very simple. Is the United States government today following Sun Tzu? Think about that one for a while. And then when we're done, you can all kind of chip in, and because there is a definite answer. So let's get started. Sun Tzu was a very politically astute politician and military strategist who lived in China about 400 BC. His treatise on practical strategies to ensure victory has been studied for over 2,000 years. Scholars and military leaders alike have benefited from his sage and timely suggestions on dealing with the 13 maxims of how to win in any conflict. You all have copies of them. His works employ the importance of psychological planning, not just perfecting the plan. His emphasis on knowing the enemy as you know yourself is themed throughout the applications of the 13 maxims, which delve into all aspects of warfare. Today's historians and military leaders have the opportunity to analyze Sun Tzu's words as applied to any period's battlefields. The teachings were first discovered in the West by a French Jesuit priest living in Peking. The Jesuits had been a force in China since 1500, when they arrived with the Portuguese. The Jesuits soon gained the respect of the imperial court. Father Amoy brought Sun Tzu's teachings to Paris in 1780, about the time of the French Revolution. During this period in France, there was much new thinking and imagination being shown by French intellectuals who were hungering for new political strategies. Sun Tzu's words were later translated into Russian and German, as well as English by the turn of the century. Of special interest is Sun Tzu's maxim that numbers alone confer no advantage. The concept flies in the face of von Clausewitz and his insistence that brute force would assure victory. His classic treatise on war is not a manual on how to wage war, but rather a collection of essays on how to observe and understand the nature of warfare in general. As for the military objective, Clausewitz defined it as imposing one's will upon the enemy by using maximum force with the aim of rendering him powerless, thus making sheer violence one of the essential features of war. Clausewitz makes it clear that distress at the brutality of war must never be allowed to inhibit the use of force. Von Clausewitz made many, many convicts, as we can see in the madness of sending waves and waves of troops into the storming of well-fortified positions. World War I. Certainly an enlightened general would seek to find some alternative to such brutality. And, as found in the trench warfare, endlessly and without satisfactory results, Sun Tzu offers a more subtle and more intellectually thoughtful solution. All war is deception. I personally encountered Sun Tzu's teachings 50 years ago when I wrote my senior paper on the maxims while attending a classical Jesuit university in New England. My teacher, also a French Jesuit who had studied Sun Tzu, suggested that I pick 3 historical battles and show how the foundations of Sun Tzu's teaching directly figured in the outcome. I chose Waterloo, Gettysburg, and the Chosun Reservoir in Korea. A couple in the 19th century and one in the 20th century. I'll start out at Waterloo. Napoleon basically had the battle won in the first 2 days. Unfortunately, Napoleon was very ill. He had dysentery. He was sick. He was having to lie down and take long stretches of naps. With Wellington's ally Blucher, remember now Napoleon's fighting Wellington, the Duke of Wellington, the English guy. The English went to the battle right from a ball. They were all in their dress uniforms. And someone said, Napoleon's broken out, he's attacking us at Waterloo. So they went, all these English officers went right to the battle in their dress uniforms. With Wellington's ally Blucher crushed in the first phase of the battle, Wellington pretended he was leaving the battlefield and had his troops lie down behind a slight depression in the battlefield. As they were now invisible to the French, and Napoleon was not able to function, Marshal Ney, who was left in charge of the battle, had to deal with Wellington, unleashed the finest cavalry in Europe on the perceived retreating British. No one did in Europe in the 19th century what the French cavalry did. They were 18,000 of the absolute premier troops. And Napoleon had kept them back. They were going to be the last deal. Marshal Ney releases them. Within 30 minutes, the French cavalry was totally destroyed. Because what Wellington did is he made the double diamonds. Where the French couldn't see, he had one group lying down, one group kneeling, and one group sitting, all in a diamond. Several hundred people in a diamond. Maybe 5,000 to 6,000 of those guys, all in diamonds. And no matter what horse you have, no matter how good the cavalry is, the horses will not go into the diamonds. At the last minute, they veer off and ride along the edge, and as they rode along the edge, the British destroyed them. Finest cavalry in the world, gone in 20 minutes. Now came the second part of the deception, as Blucher, who was thought to be retrieving but actually reorganizing, came back on the battlefield to join the British in sending Napoleon on a one-way voyage to Helena. We can blame Napoleon, but it was really Ney, who was executed, by the way, by the French after the battle. Napoleon was sent to Helena, where he was murdered. They found a picture of Napoleon with a lock of his hair, and they took a lock of his hair and tested it for poison, and he'd been given poison. So he was murdered, even though he was on Helena. That was the power of Napoleon, how people were afraid of him. I guarantee you, if he wins Waterloo, we're speaking French, I'm giving this thing in French right now. Okay, let's go on to the next one. The next one is Gettysburg. On the last day of the battle, General Winfield Scott Hancock, who was under George Meade. Meade was in general charge, but Hancock was the guy doing the positioning. In the first two battles, Robert E. Lee kicked them all over Pennsylvania. Remember, these guys are in Pennsylvania. They're 70 miles north of Washington. If they win the Battle of Gettysburg, they're going to Washington, and we got two countries. There's no one there to stop them. This is a crucial battle. And the last day, Winfield Scott Hancock teased and offered Lee what seemed to be a weak spot in the Union center. By fortifying both wings of his lines, it looked like the center could be broken. Lee took the bait and sent 12,000 Southern troops to take the middle of Hancock's line. Hancock, like Wellington, had whole rows of troops hidden in the flank indentation so as to be invisible to Lee. What came next was Pickett's charge, which ended in disaster for Lee. His division commanders tried to talk him out of it, but Lee was stubborn, as he had almost broken through the day before. He felt if he could win that day, the North would be open to negotiate a peace. But he was deceived, resulting in the loss of battle and ultimately the war. Sun Tzu said, a winning commander knows when he can fight and when he cannot fight. One who cannot be victorious must assume a defensive position. In those stances, by assuring a defensive position, strength will be more than added, whereas in offensive actions, it would be inadequate. 50,000 casualties, the biggest battle ever fought on this continent. 50,000 casualties, laying for weeks in the field. No Red Cross to speak of. Poor guys are dying of thirst. So, how did this happen? I mean, Robert E. Lee is first in his class at West Point. You know how many demerits he had? 0 in 4 years. If there's anyone you wanted running the battle, it was Robert E. Lee. What happened? Well, he had a guy that he relied on, that he always went to in these forces. Anybody know who it was? Stonewall Jackson. He was with Lee all the way from Bull Run, first battle of Bull Run. Had Lee presented to Jackson what he wanted to do, Jackson would have said, wait a minute, we're not doing that, General Lee. We're going to take the high ground and let them come to us, and we'll destroy them like we always have. No, Jackson. That was the biggest battle ever fought on this continent. And finally, we take the one that hurts the most. The first loss in the history of the United States Army was the Chosin Reservoir in Korea. Sun Tzu said a skilled general must be master of the complementary arts of simulation and dissimulation. While creating shapes to confuse and delude the enemy, he conceals his true disposition and ultimate intent. His primary target is the mind of the opposing commander. Sun Tzu recognizes the hazards of the advantages of weather. He was equally concerned with the effect of terrain. The general who can assess the value of good ground maneuvers his enemy into dangerous terrain and keeps clear of it himself. He chooses the ground on which he wishes to engage, draws his enemy into it, and then gives battle. A general unable to use the ground properly is unfit for command. In 1950, the Chinese communists deployed 250,000 hardened, experienced troops to take positions south of the Yalu River in the hills surrounding the Chosin Reservoir. As the UN troops were approaching the Yalu River, which is the Chinese border, to end the fighting in what they thought was certain victory, the Chinese sprung the trap. By the time the UN command became aware that its widely dispersed troops were even threatened, the bulk of 15,000 troops were surrounded and cut off in sub-zero weather. It was 25 below zero. The grand deception, coupled with Douglas MacArthur's supreme arrogance and stubbornness, began a driving Chinese offensive that came close to destroying the UN forces that perpetrated a 360-mile retreat by the US Army, the longest in its history. Marshal Peng and Mao Zedong used MacArthur's arrogance in order to set the trap because they had studied him in great detail and knew his mind. They concluded he was ripe for the grand deception that occurred. 90 days later, MacArthur was relieved of command. Napoleon, Robert E. and Douglas MacArthur are generally perceived as the greatest military minds of their time. Yet they all were deceived in the most important critical battles they absolutely had to win. All three ended their military careers in defeat. Anybody got any comments?
I thought it was the first Marine Division that
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
but I thought it was the first Marine Division that was fought its way to out.
There were two units. One was 10th Corps, that was MacArthur's unit, and the other was the 1st Marines that came. The 1st Marines had to go to the Chosin Reservoir,
That's right.
and they were led by General Davis, and the most famous Marine that ever lived. Anybody know who he is? Chesty Puller. 5 Navy Crosses. The New York Times wrote that Puller's Marines were wiped out, killed to the last man. Nobody left. 2 weeks later, Puller shows up with everybody. They're all wounded, they're all sick, they're all got frostbite, and they're all singing the Marine Corps hymn as they march in. Where was his Medal of Honor?
So Chris, Jean, you served in Korea, correct?
Yeah, but I was a years later, a year later, 2 years later.
Okay.
This is a book by Bevan Alexander, who also served in Korea. Bevan Alexander gave us a talk. I was in the Marine Corps, and he gave us a talk in the Officer Candidate School about battles and about Sun Tzu. And he also talked about the Battle of Gettysburg. And he talked about especially the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. I was in the 2-6, that was the 1st Marines were there. And that was Puller. And Puller was an absolute, he was an enlisted man that ended up, he was everywhere. And I never met the man, but he served as commander at our graduation when I was going through Officer Candidate School. And he got up there and the guy had medals. Didn't have enough uniform for the medals he had. And he said, well, I'm glad that I met you guys. I look at you, you march pretty well, you walk pretty straight. I'll serve with you anytime. Anytime you get in a jam, give me a call. And everybody cheered, you know. And then he says, now I'm going to go down to the brig and meet the real Marines. And all the officers go, oh, what did he have to say to that for? But that's the kind of guy he was. But tremendously skilled, and I believe the greatest Marine that ever lived. Okay, now we're going to go to the Indian Wars. You have these, so you can take any of these books that you see or any other books and use these maxims to make a judgment, your own judgment on the battle about whether they were successful or unsuccessful. And that's a lot of fun for you. And then I have a question for you at the end. So let's get into the Indian Wars. We start off with the Fetterman fight. 1866. Captain William Fetterman was sent from the fort to protect the woodcutters who had come under attack by the Sioux in Cheyenne and were lurking in the hills nearby. He had specific orders not to leave the site of the fort. Do not cross over Lodge Trail Ridge. It was written, and they made him repeat it. With Fetterman is a man named Drummond. They had fitting with the Sioux. They had fought with the Sioux about a month before, and Grumman just survived with his life. He almost got murdered. Grumman, without authority from Fetterman, crosses over Lodge Trail Ridge because he sees some Sioux women digging up turnips in a field down below, and he says, "Oh boy, Cheyenne women. I don't know what it is about Cheyenne women, but everyone I know is married to one, so they must be pretty good looking." Thank you, dear.
Not really.
So he goes down there, and of course now, what's Fetterman supposed to do? Half his men are gone. But he doesn't leave, and so they report behind him is a hill, Pilot Hill. There's a platoon of guys up there. They can see over the ridge. So they signal, Fetterman stopped. So everyone relaxes, right? All of a sudden, Fetterman's gone. Who got him to go over Lodge Trail Ridge?
Crazy horse.
Crazy Horse. How did he do it?
Made like he was running.
Well, now let's see what this is true or not. I'm going to give you some. You can believe it or not believe it. When I got finished working, I volunteered at the VA for 10 years. There was a lot of my pals up there, and I would go once a month and take a van full of soldiers to the different battlefields, and they loved it. They went nuts. And one year, I had the Crazy Horse family. Floyd Clown, Doug War Eagle, and Don Red Thunder. I was going to have them give the tour, and these guys went crazy when these guys showed them the tour. And they had all kinds of questions, and they were kidding me. And these Indians are really characters. So that one guy asked Don Red Thunder, "Don, what did Crazy Horse do to get Fetterman to go over Lodge Trail Ridge?" He said he mooned him. I mean, what can you say after that? You just gotta laugh, you know? But that's the kind of attitude they have. And they're really good friends, and they wrote a great book, and it is a wonderful book. And the other guy that's a real close friend of mine is, he teaches Donovan Sprague. He's the great-great-grandson of Hump, High Backbone, who was also there. And he has a lot of stories, too, like that. So anyway, moving along.
You're doing good, Chris. You're doing good.
Doing all right? My time? Next we got is the Reynolds fight. No one knows much about the Reynolds fight. We call it the Powder River fight. You might recognize it that way. In March 17, 1876, Colonel Joseph Reynolds of the 3rd Cavalry attacked a Cheyenne Sioux camp. They captured 700 ponies and huge stores of food that General Crook, who was in overall charge, badly needed to sustain his near-starving troops. Reynolds clearly did not know his enemy, as Sun Tzu advises, and by morning had lost all the ponies back to Hedog. The Indians got all their horses back. He compounded his failure by burning the very food that General Crook needed to stay in the field. What does Sun Tzu say about that? Sun Tzu stresses the tremendous value of capturing food from the enemy in the field as being 20 times more than if it's your own. You don't have to pack it, you don't have to ship it, you don't have to put it where you can get it. It is folly to burn it and not utilize it yourself. Who's in charge of that operation? George Crook. Where does he finish in West Point? 5th last in his class. Oh, we're not done with Crook. Where do we get to the Rosebud? Okay, now we're at the Rosebud Creek, Decker, Montana, 17 June 1876, a week before you know what. Crook was attacked in the morning by 800 Cheyenne and Sioux. He was alerted by his 200 Crow and Shoshone scouts who were employed to find the Indian encampment. They had come in several days before. Crack troops, good horses, brand new weapons, in formation. Crook says, boys, it's a cold camp, no fires. Don't go out of camp. We don't want crazy horses out there. We don't want to tell them where we are. So they said, okay, and the next day they hunted buffalo. I mean, talk about stupid. These were the same scouts who the day before at a buffalo hunt, thus alerting Crazy Horse to exactly where Crook was. The lack of discipline that Crook had over his troops almost cost him his life. Worse, it removed the southern anvil against which the Indians were to be crushed. This ensured the disaster that befell Custer 8 days later. And then what did Crook do? He went fishing in Sheridan for 5 weeks while his buddies are getting slaughtered on the Little Bighorn. How does a man like this survive? Who was his roommate at West Point? Philip Sheridan. You can't make this up. Now we get to the Little Bighorn. And I am convinced in my life and in your life, we will never get a consensus on the Little Bighorn. And we'll never get a consensus on the Fetterman fight, even though Shannon Smith pretty well knocked out the nonsense that Fetterman said, with 80 men I can ride through the whole Sioux Nation. He never said that. This was a man who was a hero in the Civil War, had 10,000 troops under him. He volunteered because he was the most qualified guy. That came out of the women, Carrington's wives, that wrote books trying to save Carrington, because Carrington was the guy that screwed it up, not Fetterman. So Shannon has the book on that one. That's a wonderful book. This is the #1 book to read on the Fetterman fight. Shannon Smith, wonderful girl. And here's the best one on the Little Bighorn, in my view, Maria Sandoz, a Swiss girl who came. This book was published posthumously. She died. She was dead when this book was published. 1966. There's people that take shots at her, but I've not heard one thing that she's written that's been set aside. This is gold in my eyes. So I'm just giving you an idea of the different books. You read the ones you want. So let's get after the Little Bighorn and find out, why is that such a controversy? And it's because everyone has read something about it. Everyone has seen a movie about it. So you have an opinion. But there's a lot of stuff about Custer that people don't know. And in studying it, you learn different things. And so you then say, oh, Custer is not an easy guy to deal with either. So let's talk, I'll give you as much information as I can about Custer. I'll recommend certain birds to read, and then find your own book and use Sun Tzu and figure it out. You all come to your conclusion. That's what this is. That's what makes it fun. Is we can all do it, okay? So let me get to Custer, because he is a piece of work. Custer's troops attacked the Indian village on 25 June 1876. The Indians were surprised and completely unaware of his presence. Custer thinks, they spotted him, so I better go get him before they run. What was Custer's worst fear? That they'd beat him? No, that they'd run and he couldn't get him. That was his worst fear. You're talking to a guy who had 11 horses shot out from under in the Civil War. 11! This guy was shot more times than, who do you think killed Jeb Stuart? Custer's men. What did Custer do at Gettysburg? At Gettysburg, Jeb Stuart wasn't there. So Lee didn't have his best guy. Jeb Stuart came down on the night of the second day at Gettysburg, and he said, well, here I am, General Lee. I bought you 120 wagons of supplies. And Lee said, where the hell have you been? Man, I don't know what's going on. And he says, well, if I don't serve you anymore, here's my sword. And Lee said, we don't have any time for that crap. Now you're going to help me beat these people, aren't you? So what is Stuart's job? To go around behind the Union line and attack them from the rear. So Pickett's going to hit him from the front, right? And Jeb Stuart's going to hit him from behind. Why don't we hear anything about Jeb Stuart's fight at Gettysburg? Because he was attacked before he got there. You know who attacked him? Their slogan was, "Go you Wolverines." Michigan 5th, George Armstrong Custer, broke up the attack before they could do it. This guy was Custer during the Civil War and before was incredible. He was a genuine bona fide hero. Was he complicated? Oh man, complicated. This guy. When they chose to make the strategy for the Little Bighorn, here was the strategy. On January 1st, they told the Indians, you guys are coming off the reservations and get back. And if you're not back by January 31st, we're coming, we're going to kill all the men that are not on the reservation, and we're going to go and put the women and children back on the reservation. And we're going to do it, we're going to have an anvil, that's Crook. And we're going to have a hammer, and that's Custer, or it's not Custer yet, it's Terry and Gibbons. Butte, Montana, and Bismarck, North Dakota, the home of the 7th Cav. They're going to come down, they're going to be the hammer, and the anvil's going to sit there, and they're going to hammer those Indians and get rid of them once and for all. Sheridan's famous statement is the only good Indian is a dead Indian. He was tired of it, he wanted to get rid of it. Let's end this damn thing, I'm tired of this. So, someone says, well, who's going to be the anvil? And who's going to be the hammer? So Crook's going to be the anvil. And the hammer's going to be, well, we have Terry. Terry, good guy, Yale, Skull and Bones, CIA. Never heard a shot fired in combat. He's not going to be of any help. He can't be. There's only one guy can lead, and he's not in the Army. Custer's been kicked out by Grant because he ratted on Grant's brother and said that the Indians weren't getting their reservation, weren't getting their food because the Army didn't give them the food anymore. The churches gave them the food. The Lutherans took one side, the Catholics took one side, the Episcopalians took one side, and they weren't giving them the money, they were putting it in their pocket. So the Indians were coming off the reservations. You can let your wife and 2 little kids starve? Hell no, you're gonna go, there's 30 million buffalo, you're gonna go shoot the buffalo. So the Army decided that's what they were gonna do. Well, Custer's not in the Army, so they send him a telegram that said, get ready for orders. He's in Monroe, Michigan with his wife. You have Sheridan, Sherman, and Grant. Grant's president. And Sherman goes to Grant and says, Sam, he said, we got to get someone to lead this battle. And Grant says, he's not going. I kicked him out of the Army and he's staying out of the Army. He accused my brother of stealing money and I will not have it, and don't ever bring it up to me again. So Sheridan talks to Sherman and says, hey, we got to get, you know who. He said, man, I tried to talk to him today, almost took my head off. He said, well, try one more time. Try one more time. So Sherman comes in and Grant looks up and says, he's not going. Sherman says, Sam, would you just listen to me and I'll never bring it up again, I promise. So Sherman says, or Grant says, okay. He says, you have your choice. Tomorrow morning you can get a telegram that says, saw a big bunch of Indians. We'll catch up to them next week and hopefully can engage them. George Crook, Brigadier General, United States Army. You can get that telegram. Or the other telegram you can get says, saw a big bunch of Indians to the northwest, killed half the bastards today, I'll finish them off in the morning. George Armstrong Custer, Brigadier General. So Grant goes to the window and says, all right, he can go, but he's not leading. He wants the guy from the second cab to leave, because he'll be in charge. And Custer will be there, but he won't be in charge. And that's what Grant wants. So, we get the orders. Custer's orders. But when applying Sun Tzu's maxims to Custer's actions, strategies, and order of battle, we are not really surprised that Custer broke or ignored 12 of the 13 maxims. Custer was the weaker force, but left no way to withdraw. His officers were not united in purpose. He did not command good ground and did not have harmonious relations with each other. His officers hated him. What's the guy's name?
Benteen.
No, Benteen hated Custer. Custer got Benteen's best friend killed at the Battle of the Washita. Okay. Custer was the weaker force, but left no way to withdraw. His officers were not united. He made no calculations as to the degree of difficulty. He did not calculate or evaluate the number of the enemy, the quality of their equipment, or the state of their morale. His attack was not precisely regulated. He did not choose the valiant to lead the fight. He arrived on the battlefield last and rushed into the fight with weary troops and horses. He further put himself at risk by initiating attacks on the enemy's elite troops. He assumed the enemy would not attack rather than relying on his own readiness to meet him. He attacked ground easy to get into but difficult to return from. His troops fled, were insubordinate, collapsed in disorder. All of this is the fault of the general. None of this can be attributed to natural causes. Confirmation of the ground was not done, and the difficulty of the terrain was not established. Custer allowed his formations to be separated. He did not nourish and prepare his troops. He unnecessarily fatigued them. He was offered foreknowledge from men who knew the situation, but his arrogance and stubbornness doomed him to defeat. Lest you feel I am too critical of those in command, of those in battle, I confess I found them all to be brave. I do not question in any way their courage, only their lack of adherence to winning maxims. If this be true, the Battle of the Little Bighorn actually was fought 2,000 years ago. Okay, now did I make it?
You did. You did great. Thanks.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Is the United States government practicing Sun Tzu today? Is the military looking, reading, interpreting, and applying Sun Tzu's maxims to the way we run our army? Anybody got an idea? You know, you'll feel stupid when I tell you. I'm going to give you 4 words, okay? You ever heard these words before? Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Gulf of Mexico. You know how many ships we have deployed out there? 40. You're the biggest ship in the world. George Bush sitting in the Gulf of Mexico. Because that's where they're coming from. That's where they're bringing the what's killing us is the drugs. So I think you can assume that we are reading Sun Tzu. And after Korea, we read it. And a lot of guys, this gentleman here was a commanding, Bevis Alexander wrote the book on Gettysburg. He gave us a talk when we were in officer candidate school about Gettysburg and about Korea. They had a wonderful talk in Korea. And there were so many things there that were, that could have gone either way, but MacArthur had his mind made up and he wouldn't change. Truman asked George Marshall, why was Truman even vice president? Anybody remember? You can't. He was from Missouri, and Roosevelt needed Missouri to win the damn presidency. So Truman delivered vice president Missouri, and he was made vice president. You know how many times Roosevelt talked to Truman in 122 days? Twice. George Marshall was the Secretary of State. And Truman loved to walk in the morning. And he says to Marshall, take these telegrams and read them for me. In the morning, stop in early in the morning. I want to talk to you about these telegrams. And they're telegrams from MacArthur to Truman. And Truman gets to his office at 7 o'clock. And Marshall's there already sitting on the couch. And before Truman can say good morning, he says, if it was me, I'd have fired the SOB 6 weeks ago. I mean, MacArthur didn't answer to anybody. He did what the hell he wanted. I'm going to bomb you. He goes to Chiang Kai-shek and says, yeah, you give us troops. And, you know, Mao ain't a dummy. Mao didn't get there by mistake. And that was the first war the United States lost. The second was Vietnam, and we did the same thing all over again. We're reading it today. Believe me. They're doing exactly the right thing. So,
Chris, could you tell us where Custer graduated in his class?
Custer had the extreme glory of being the last in his class. 464 demerits.
Oh my God.
A record. Where did Robert E. Lee finish in his class? First. How many demerits? 0 in 4 years. Can you imagine going through West Point as tough as they are with 0 demerits? I mean, this was a leader. But he didn't have the guy he needed that he'd been with all the time. How did Stonewall Jackson get in charge? He was at Bull Run. Anybody here from Virginia? Okay, I can tell you then. Jackson's at Bull Run, and he's up on top of a hill, on Henry Hill. And he's standing up there, and he's praying. He was a religious man. He was a very religious man. He's up there with his arm up, and he's praying. And General B from South Carolina is down there getting whipped to daylight by the Union Army. And he says, look at that Dave Jackson standing there like a stone wall. It wasn't but people from Virginia can't handle it. Well, actually, Jackson was waiting for him to get a little bit further across, and then down he came and wiped him out. And if you want to do anything, you ask Stonewall Jackson, because he was the man. And again, at Gettysburg, he would have said to Lee, no, General Lee, we're not doing that. We're going to get him up the high ground, and then we'll kill him. We'll wipe him out like we always did. And he would have. But people get killed. And you know, the other thing is, after the Civil War, most of the really great officers were killed, to be honest, in the battles. The ones that weren't killed were so sick of killing men, they just wanted to get out. They wanted to go farm somewhere. And the ones that were left were a lot of administrative guys. Terry'd never been in combat. Carrington never been in combat. These are guys in charge of key points. So they really relied on the men under them. And when those guys couldn't come in, I mean, what were Stonewall, what were Custer's orders? What were his orders at the Little Bighorn? He gets told to come back because Grant said, all right. He goes to Bismarck. He's there with Terry and Gibbons. Gibbons from Minnesota. He's got troops with him, and Custer's got all of Terry's troops. And Terry says, look, I want you to go down through, anyone ever been to the Rosebud Valley here?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely gorgeous. I mean, if there's a more beautiful place on this earth, I don't know where it is. And when the horses step on the wild orchids and they have this beautiful aroma, and both mountains on either side, it is gorgeous. Custer's job was to go down that valley and probe. Don't go half crazy. Don't go after the first Indians you see. All you have to do is find them. Just find them. And on the night of the 26th, we'll be there. And we'll hook up. You are going to be the hammer. And Crook is going to be the anvil. And we're going to hammer those Indians once and for all and end this. I'm tired of it. Sheridan said, only good Indians are dead Indians. That was the plan. Anvil, hammer. So Crook leaves with his orders. Custer has his orders. And they're down on Yellowstone River runs into how can I forget the name of the river? The one down the middle of the country.
Missouri.
Huh?
Missouri.
Missouri, thanks. Don't get that. Are you 86 yet? I'm 86, folks. I can forget. I always got guys like Jim to bail me out. So you have the Yellowstone, the Missouri, and then the Yellowstone. They all come together. Well, if anyone read my brother Sam's book, Where the Rivers Run North, you realize the rivers run north, not south. So what does Custer do? He's in on the far west, the steamer that's bringing the troops down to put them in position to be the hammer. And Custer is on the ship with General Sheridan. And General Sheridan says, here are your orders. And he gives him his orders. You are to probe. And then at night, Custer's writing a letter to his wife, and Sheridan comes back to him and says, I feel a little funny. I don't want to tie your hands. If you have a chance to exploit something, I'll back you up 100%. A lot of people don't know that. Custer had the right to do what he thought was best. Well, we all know what that is, don't we, folks? I mean, you can argue he may have done it anyway, but... And then as he's leaving to get off the far west and join his cavalry and ride down to where he's supposed to ride down the Rosebud to follow Sitting Bull. He's told by Gibbons, now Custer, don't you be greedy, leave some for us. And Custer looks at him for 2 minutes, doesn't say a word. Then he says, no, I won't. Did he mean, no, I won't be greedy? Or no, I won't leave some for you? I know what I think it means, but we'll never know. That's why people can't come to a conclusion about Custer. They have great difficulty. So it's all I can do is lay out the books for you and read them and study them and come to your own conclusions. And it's a lot of fun. And if you use Sun Tzu, you'll be amazed at how many people here were so sure that we were doing the right thing now with the enemy. No one said. One guy. I beg your pardon. One man here knew. There's nobody else knew. You knew, you didn't focus on it. You knew all about it, but you didn't focus on it. So these books will help you focus. And
Can I interrupt your train of
yeah,
thought there?
sure.
I do these battlefield tours, and
Yeah, oh yeah,
people come from everywhere.
oh yeah.
And, of course, they're interested in the Custer thing, and so we go up and what I do is I go toward Busby, and then I cut across, and I show them the route Custer took
Yeah.
the night before the battle.
Yeah.
This makes it, if you see the terrain and you are actually there, read about it, you can see movies and everything else, read books. You don't get the scope. I'm telling you, he came up Rosebud Creek,
Had to
stopped
cross-
for briefly,
Yeah,
marched all night,
all night, the horses wouldn't drink the water.
and then went another 16 miles down to the battle site
In the dark,
in the dark.
leaving supplies all over the field.
And then, so when it was time to fight, the men were exhausted, the horses were totally worn out, as evidenced by the one trooper that got left there, Thompson, I think.
Oh, yeah. Well, what happened was, as you say, Custer was going down the Rosebud and he saw where the Sioux went over the hill.
Mhm.
Pretty hard not to find 20,000 horses going over a hill, okay? So he followed them and he planned to water his horses on top of the hill. And then he'd be a short drive down in the morning. Well, the horses wouldn't drink the water, it was salty. So he had to come down in the dark. And he came down that hill in the dark, and there was food and guns and everything all over the place. So his brother, Tom Custer, who has 2 medals of honor, only the second man in United States history of the whole country to ever win 2 medals of honor, Tom Custer says, I went back to try to get some of the stuff that fell off last night, and there was Indians around our stuff. We've been spotted. Custer goes, oh my God. And then he goes to lunch. He goes to, what's the name of that place where they saw the Indians?
Crow's Nest.
Crow's Nest.
Crow's Nest. And he looks with binoculars. You know, in the summer how it's real hot. You see the, you know, it's 90 degrees. You see those vapors. You can't see much on the ground. And he sees that. And he says, I can't see him. He said, look to the left, and there's a pony herd of 20,000 horses. Well, he saw that. And he turns and says to his brother Tom, Tom called George Custer Audie. Because when he was a little kid, he couldn't say Armstrong, so he called him Audie. He said, Audie, you're not thinking of going now, right? And Custer said, yeah, we got to go now. And Tom said, oh, you don't have to do that. Custer said, yeah, I do. So they take on. Now, my brother Mike wrote that, was the governor of the state, but Mike it was 25 years ago, so he was maybe in his 40s.
Mhm.
He wrote that, and he said, it looks like it's all gulches and prairies. And he lay down on the ground for 45 minutes, totally exhausted. He said, that's the worst ride he's ever made in his life. So can you imagine the state that troop is in after having ridden all night? And now they come to the foot of the battlefield? And who does he send into the battlefield to lead the battle? Of all people in the world, the worst person, if I think of every person I ever heard about in the world, this was the worst guy. Reno.
And it turned out to be true.
It turned out to be worse than true. Reno, I don't know whether they found him or how he got there, but they had to put somebody in charge. And so Reno was the guy who was supposed to go in and attack the village. Whose village does he attack? Of all the Indians you ever heard of, who was the last guy you'd attack? Sitting Bull, that's who he attacked. And he got his ass whipped by a bunch of guys who weren't even looking for a battle. Most of them didn't even have their horses. So he was running before the battle really got started. And he ran down to the river. And where he went in the river was pretty good cover, to be honest with you. It was good cover.
Yep.
They were doing much better there. And what was this guy's name? Bloody Knife, right?
Mm-hmm.
Custer gave Reno his guide. And Bloody Knife, while they're in the river, doing
much better, is shot in the head. And the bullet and the blood sprays all over Reno. And he loses it.
That was it.
That's it. He's gone. Gets on his horse, rides out. Guys dragging on the stirrups, they're wounded, dragging them across, and the Indians are shooting them in the back. Oh. Reno gets up on the hill. Now they're no threat to the Indians. Now half the Indians were sleeping, they're awake now and say, what's going on? Crazy Horse now gets his horse, right? He's on his horse, puts the hawk on, now you're serious. And they run up the hill until they're not a threat to the Indians anymore. They're out in the middle and they've got no cover, but he puts guys around. There's a couple Indians shooting at them, but no one's really attacking anymore because there's no threat on the village. Who are they after now? Custer. And Custer's ridden along the river. He has not seen the village yet, hasn't seen the Indians. He gets to Medicine Tail Coulee. And on Medicine Tail Coulee, if you haven't been to the Little Bighorn, the river is really low and close to the mountain. And there's a huge 500-foot bluff. That's where Custer is up there. He cannot see the Indians below. They're too close to the river. You know, their whole village is in the trees. It's 90 degrees. They're not going to put their tent outside. The tent's going to be in the river. So Custer gets to Medicine Tail Coulee, and who does he see? Oh, my God. The Cheyenne. First one they see, and they're camped right at the end of Medicine Tail Coulee. And who does he send down to deal with the Cheyenne? His brother, Tom Custer. Tom Custer gets killed almost immediately. He's dead. Half in the water, half out of the water. Custer now for the first time sees what he's up against. But he can't see a lot of what's going on because it's still blocked. It's still underneath the lid. You can't see it. And what he sees is Sitting Bull and a bunch of women and children and aunts and sisters and daughters running to safety at Shoulder Blade Creek. There's a little creek there with a little thing where you can hide. And the Indians are taking all the women to get them off the battlefield. The Indians haven't even begun to fight yet. And they attack Sitting Bull's camp. Oh, big mistake. So now, who's the guy that had his wife and children killed? Gall? Gall. Gall's wife is killed. And his children. He's away he's fishing. He comes back and his wife and daughter. Well, we know who killed his wife and daughter. Bloody Knife. He had a thing with Gall that went back 10 years. And then that's why they killed him. So now Custer is 4 miles away, and he's looking to find a spot where he can cross the river and grab the women and children and say to the Indians, come on, boys, let's be reasonable now. You go back to your reservation, we'll put these back, and, that'll be the end of it. And if not, we're going to wipe you out. Well, Crazy Horse is now done fooling around with Reno. He's now waiting up Custer. And he goes up and looks, and there's Custer, dismounted. His brother-in-law, Jimmy Calhoun, dismounted. And between them, Miles Keogh, first lieutenant, best soldier in the regiment. All kneeling down, ammunition in the grass, shooting at the Sioux in the river. And they're doing all right. They're doing all right. So Crazy Horse goes up around and comes up behind, and there are 50 soldiers holding 200 horses. They're holding Custer's horses. The horses are snapped together on the top, 4 horses to a set of bridles, and one guy holding 4 horses. Crazy Horse wipes out those 50 men in 5 minutes. He has 1,000 men. Wipes them out in 5 minutes. Now all the horses are there, okay? It's 93 degrees. Where do the horses go? Down the river. Who gets the horses? All the Indian women. And what's in the saddlebags? All the ammunition. Custer lost because he ran out of ammunition. That's why he lost. Oh, this guy did this, and this guy did that, and this guy did this. He had never ammunition because Crazy Horse outslicked him. That's pretty simple. But no, we're going to go on for another 200 years arguing about whether Custer was a good guy or Custer was a bad guy. What were his orders? And Miles Keogh had a medal around his neck. He fought with the Pope. He was a hero in Italy. And he was the best soldier on the battlefield. Why do you think Custer had him next to him? And next to him was his brother, Jimmy Calhoun. And what were they all doing? Looking. Where's the ammo? Where's Benteen with the ammo? What does Benteen do? He drops the ammo off, gives it to some other officer, and goes fishing for 5 weeks. You can't make it up.
I think you're wrong.
You cannot make it up.
Benteen goes to Reno.
Hmm?
Benteen goes to Reno.
I'm sorry. Benteen goes to Reno, and then
Cook took a vacation.
Crook, yeah, Crook.
Yeah. Well,
And-
he should have, because, did you know Elmer Cobalt
Yeah,
that owned the site?
yeah.
They said they shot 60,000 rounds of ammunition. Well, actually,
He had
lost
150.
it.
He had 150.
What the soldiers would do, he had infantry.
Yeah.
They do what infantry does, you lay your bullets out.
Lay him in the grass.
And lay it in the
Kneel
grass,
down.
and then your officer comes by and tells you to run to a different place.
You don't pick it up. You
You
don't
don't
have
pick it up,
time.
you run to a different place, so Elmer found all this unfired ammunition out there. And then when they got back to Sheridan, they didn't have any bullets, they couldn't help anybody.
Yeah.
They had to send for more ammo from Omaha.
Well, Crook is the one I have difficulty with. He had orders to bring the ammunition and he went fishing. While those guys are fighting for their lives, the Little Bighorn, Crook is fishing in Sharon, Wyoming,
Yep.
bragging about all the trout he caught. And this guy's back in the army after that? I mean, you can't make it up.
And his buddy Reynolds, I understand, made a mistake down there when he attacked the village on Powder River, because they thought it was Crazy Horse, but not knowing that Crazy Horse had given his horse to that chief,
Right,
and it was the group was misidentified.
right.
It's up to that point, the Cheyenne was still trying to make.
They went to Crazy Horse later and he helped them out, but he wasn't fucking Crazy Horse.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, the two guys who left the soldiers who were wounded behind, you never leave wounded troops behind. The two guys that left them behind got the Medal of Honor. That's another thing the Army has a nice habit of doing. Every time they get really in a horrible battle where they get terrible casualties, they hand out medals of honor like they're water. You know how many they handed out at the Little Bighorn? Take a guess. 26. For getting a canteen full of water for your buddy, you get a Medal of Honor? Hello?
Well, let me make a point about that.
Okay.
At that point in the Army, there wasn't a Distinguished Service Cross or a Silver Star or a bronze medal with valor. The only thing you had was a Medal of Honor. And so a lot of people ended up with Medals of Honor that never would have.
So that
People, a lot of people got Medals of Honor in those days that they never get today.
right. So that we're talking about the Medal of Honor and not what a terrible defeat it was. Must have been a terrible battle. They gave 7 at Iwo Jima, okay?
Well, you can, okay, I mean, you can give a Medal of Honor even if you lose. I mean, that's an individual award. That's an individual award for bravery. It's not an individual award for victory.
Where did the Medals of Honor come from? The court-martial.
They were awarded after the court-martial.
You're talking about what? Custer?
I'm talking about Custer at the court-martial, where they court-martialed Reno. And they said to Reno, you know, this, and they said, don't answer. And he didn't have to answer. They said, well, why are we here? And if you read the Reno court-martial, you'll see what a useless thing that was.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with that part.
Yeah. No, but I've just noticed that the Army has a certain way of kind of, they want you to talk about the medals of honor, not about the battle. To me, that's their goal. I mean, what else can they do? There's no questions, and Reno's not gonna answer anything. He's been told, don't you say a word. So we come to 2025 and we still haven't solved it, right?
I guess
That's okay, nothing says you gotta solve it, but
I guess I've got one. What's the first maxim from Sun Tzu?
offer the enemy a bait to lure him, feign disorder and strike him, pretend inferiority and encourage his arrogance, and attack where he is unprepared. Sally out when he does not expect you.
My understanding is that the first maxim is the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting.
That's number one. That's the greatest way you can do it.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you don't have to fight at all, the guy quits. What's better than that?
There isn't any. That's what I said.
Absolutely. And there's a few of those in history too.
So when you talk about the give and take in these things here, a lot of it boils down to the quality of your intelligence. But not how smart you are, but how much you know about everything that's going on. Not only the landscape, but the enemy.
Absolutely. Who decided where you went at West Point? Know what they did? Top third. Engineers. Everyone in the top third at West Point was an engineer. They built forts, they built roads, they moved rivers, they did all this stuff. They were brilliant people. Who were the second? Artillery. Give me those cannons, man, I want cannons. And who were the third? Cavalry. And what course did they teach at West Point on fighting the Sioux Indians? Nothing. You went out and listened to the guy that was there a week before you were. Who knew less than you did? That's what happened in the West. What was the one thing that, if you love Indians, we all do, was the one thing we could have stopped? And we had no power to do it.
Killing off the buffalo.
Discovery of gold.
Oh, that too, yeah.
1862, they found gold in Montana, and I always thought, you know, when you said, you know, founding the West, that was a good thing. The more I read, it's the worst thing we could have done. Because everything we did was get rid of the Indians, and if the buffalo are in the way, kill them too. And now we can't kill the Indians, let's kill all the buffalo, and then the Indians can't eat, and we'll get rid of them that way. That's our history? Gosh, that's pretty rough.
Worked.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
And then, hold it, we're not done yet.
Oh, okay.
I tried.
When you wake up this morning and you turn on News Nation, CNN, and you find that the George W. Bush, with 20 escort vessels, is in the Gulf of Mexico, you think, what in the hell is going on? And it's to stop the drugs from coming into the South, because that's where they're doing it. And they are saying now that for every ship that they sink, is 25,000 American lives saved. That's how many people are killed with this stuff. Folks,
I lived in China for 6 years. I have no illusions about the Chinese at all. But I was, when I went there, I was prepared. Who are the wonderful folks that gave us COVID? You think that's an accident? After Tiananmen Square, I was at work Monday, and at 11 o'clock in the morning, my staff said, "There's some guys here who want to talk to you." And I notified 3 of my biggest customers. And at that moment, I was putting up 8 500 megawatt power stations, constructing them in China. I had people all over China in 8 different provinces. Guys working on it, engineers, making sure they were doing right. There's 3 guys I know, my best customers, and 1 guy I never saw before. And they say, "Well, you know, Mr. Morton, we're really glad you're here. A lot of people have left, they've gone home. And, you know, we just wanted to talk to you, you know, make sure, you know, we know that there were terrible exaggerations about this Tiananmen Square. Really, you know, it was just all, it was just so blown up, it was really not correct at all. I mean, I don't say a word." And they said, "Yeah, you know, it was really, there's so much, you know, exaggeration." And the guy said, and they didn't know I could understand Mandarin. And he said, "Make them say it." I said, "What the hell is this all about?" And then it dawns on me. Christopher Morton, Vice President of Joy Technologies, currently one of the biggest constructor of power stations in the country, agrees that it was greatly, that'll be in the front page of the New York Times. Think I'm gonna say anything like that? I said, "Partner, it's over. I talked to my boss, we're all staying. I told my servicemen, don't go anywhere. We're going to work tomorrow morning, just like we always did. Now, you wanna talk about work? Here I am." And the guy looks at me like, and he says it again, "Make them say it." Because they had the article already. Well, I didn't fall for that, thank God. You know, I might have tried to be a good guy, so, "Oh, yeah. No. Hour later, my boss calls. I have a new boss. He was assigned on Friday. The old boss is gone, the new boss says, "You need to come home." I said, "I can't leave now. Are you crazy? I can't leave now." He said, "You gotta come home." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "People are asking me questions. I'm the chairman of the board of this company, and I can't answer them. I need you next to me." I said, "Well, if it's like that, okay, it's like that." But there was so much hoop-de-dow. Today, you don't even hear about it, and yet it happened. So, I hope you'll all get some of these books. They're all good ones, and there's a whole list on the back that Judy was nice enough to make. And I hope you can kind of do your own stuff about studying, and it's really interesting. You'll learn a lot about it, about just history generally, and some of it you know, and it fills in the holes where you didn't know. And, you know, you get to a point, and I can only tell you this is what I've found. I read all these books, and this is what and if you concluded something different, I'm not saying you're wrong. Tell me what you think. That's how you'll learn. All right, Miss Judy, did we get it done in time? We're a little over, 5 minutes over. Thank you all for coming. And thank Judy for setting this up.